Great Demon King, Chapter 17. An Evil, Honest Grin. Fanny dashed across the training field at the first sight of Han Shuo's distress. Long, athletic legs powered her swift strides, but in her panic, she failed to notice the outstretched hands on the ground. In a breathless rush, her booted foot landed squarely on Han Shuo's left hand. The tall stiletto heel, driven by her momentum, sent pain stabbing through his bones. Even though he had emerged from a hard-fought brawl moments before, that single careless step from Fanny hurt more than any of his battle wounds. He gave a strangled cry, his expression contorted in genuine agony. "Master Fanny," he managed to sputter. "My hand? You're stepping on my hand." Startled out of her haste, Fanny gasped an immediate apology. Horrified, she withdrew her foot, but shifted it sideways, unaware that his other hand was there. Seeing the impending spike, Han Shuo yanked his right hand away just in time, and while he was still reeling, he pointed back toward the disheveled group standing behind him. They hit me," he wailed, swiping the wet crimson across his face in a show of pathetic helplessness. Though Carey and Borg had suffered their own share of bruises and bleeding noses, they had scrambled to wipe all evidence from their faces the moment Fanny arrived. Wooden staves, now cast aside and flecked with crimson, lay scattered across the floor. In Fanny's eyes, it was obvious who the culprits were. "What have you all done to Brian?" she snapped, fury coloring her voice. "I'm reporting this incident to the school authorities. I cannot abide so many of you ganging up on a single, frail student." Carey, desperation etched in every tense muscle, tried to speak up in protest. He insisted that Han Shuo had been the one doing the beating, and he appealed to Jack for confirmation. Yet Jack, recalling Han Shuo's meaningful glance, summoned surprising courage and accused them of lying. With determined indignation, Jack declared that honest Jack would not cover for bullies. Fanny had heard enough. She silenced Carey's protests with a disdainful motion, then turned her attention to Han Shuo. Reaching down, she gently took hold of his collar. Though he was bigger than she was, her grip lifted him in a show of quiet strength and protective concern. "Come with me," she told him softly. "I'll treat your wounds at once. You're an important subject of my research. I can't have you injured so frequently." Han Shuo, aware of the eyes fixed on him, made a show of staggering in pain. Beneath his theatrics, however, a wave of relief washed over him. Fanny's proximity and sweet scent momentarily eased the memory of how she had flattened his hand with her boot. He managed to flash a broad, almost foolish smile at Carey and Borg. From their battered perspective, the grin looked anything but innocent. It seemed downright malicious. Soon enough, they arrived at Fanny's laboratory. There, Lisa joined them, making casual conversation about having a question for Fanny. Her gaze lingered on Han Shuo with a curious intensity that unsettled him. When she suggested tending his wounds herself, Fanny agreed without suspecting Lisa's intentions. Han Shuo obediently lay on a makeshift bed, letting Lisa carefully dab medicine onto his back. Then she discovered something odd. His injury seemed to have started healing. A thin layer of scabbing already covered the torn flesh. Han Shuo, wary of her suspicions, feigned pained groans, though, in truth, the injury did still hurt. Despite his efforts, Lisa pressed harder than necessary on the wound, making him clench his teeth to stifle a yell. Leaning over until her lips nearly touched his ear, she whispered that she had eavesdropped on his earlier conversation with Jack, watching him beat up Carey with her summoned ghoul. She grinned in smug triumph, hinting that she knew he was faking most of his current feebleness. "Damn Brian," she murmured under her breath. "You tricked me with that nonsense about refining medicine. And you left me thinking you'd turned into a corpse that night. Then you gave me the wrong recipe. Carey and Borg had to suffer through my experiment. But it could have been me." She reminded him of the last time they sparred, how he had kissed her and touched her in ways that left her both startled and furious. Prodding his wound with deliberate force, she demanded a clandestine meeting behind the classroom building that very night. If he refused, she promised a dire reckoning. Han Shuo cursed inwardly at the throbbing pain, but dared not oppose her directly. Lisa then left him to Fanny, who, after rummaging for bandages, exclaimed in surprise that the wound looked partially healed. She theorized it might be due to the lingering effects of the agony of the soul from his past injuries. To Han Shuo's relief, she seemed pleased with her own explanation, dressing him with great tenderness and care. As she finished, Han Shuo glimpsed a slim figure loitering near the open door. Fitch stood there a moment, face twisted with envy. Then, noticing Han Shuo's gaze, Fitch ducked away out of sight. Han Shuo lay still on the bed, mind churning. Between the brutal brawl, Lisa's ultimatum, and Fit's furtive stare, it felt as if the entire academy had gone up in a swirl of upheaval. Yet there he was, safely ensconced under Fanny's care, masking his true strength behind that honest, guileless smile that now held just a hint of sharp-edged mischief.